Due to the fact that a lot of people are having a difficult time in understanding the latest season from Attack on Titan, I am going to do my best in order to explain the lore of the universe of AOT without going into manga territory and offering spoilers. So if you're watching this video, I will assume that you have seen the episodes of the final season without having read the manga. And with that said, let's begin. In the world of Attack on Titan, you have an ethnicity of people called the Eldians. And they, and only they, have the ability to transform into Titans. And as you can imagine, in a medieval society, having access to such a powerful ability meant that the Eldians could absolutely crush all the other nations surrounding them and thus formed an Eldian empire. And while they have used the power of the Titans to subjugate and dominate other nations of people, they also used it in order to build roads, build farms, and transport massive goods from one side of the empire to another. But the power of the Titans came with a great cost. While every Eldian had the ability under certain circumstances to transform into a mindless Titan, there were only 9 people in the whole Eldian Empire with the ability to become Titan shifters. This power allowed them to transform from Titan into human form and vice versa, but more importantly, allowed them to retain their intelligence while in Titan form. However, these 9 special individuals were affected by a condition which is called the Curse of Emir. The Curse of Emir means that once a person gets the Founding Titan ability, they will die within 13 years. Which means that certain noble families would sacrifice their children every 13 years in order to maintain these Founding Titans within their bloodline. Now, I want you to take a step back and think about the morality of this situation. If you are a member of a noble family and your 6-year-old child just inherited the Founding Titan's abilities, you know that in 13 years, some other member of your family will have to eat that child in order for the ability to remain within your bloodline. Imagine what that can do to a person. And then imagine that if these are the ruling elites of the Eldian Empire who are capable of making these types of sacrifices when it comes to their family, imagine the type of sacrifices they're willing to do when it comes to their citizens. So it's no wonder that the Eldian Empire did do some nasty things within the past. And when you take into account that gaining the ability of the Founding Titan means that you're also going to inherit all of the memories of those coming before you, then you realize that this has the potential of putting a lot of guilt and shame on the new inheritor. And one of these inheritors happened to be King Fritz. King Fritz was burdened and shamed by the sins that the Eldians have committed in order to create the Eldian Empire. And because he could no longer stand for the horrors that the Eldians brought upon the world, he took a more passive role when it came to Eldian politics. And because the Eldian Empire was running out of enemies, the 8 great houses, each of one having a Founding Titan within their bloodline, went to war with each other, causing the Great Titan War, or the Eldian Civil War, as history remembers. And it's during this conflict that one of the people which the Eldian Empire subjugated, the Marleyans, managed to rise to power. The Marleyans were a different ethnicity of people which had empire-building ambitions of their own, but due to the fact that they did not have access to the Titan powers, they were completely dominated by the Eldians. However, due to the Eldian Civil War, they viewed this as an opportunity to rise up against their oppressors. And it is at this point that Karl Fritz, who is tired of all the bloodshed, decides to join a conspiracy with the Tiber family. And together, they played both parts of the civil war in order to push Eldia on a path towards destruction as retribution for the atrocities that the Empire committed throughout humanity's history. They also created a fictional Marleyan hero known as Hellas. Legends would later tell that during the Great Titan War, Hellas slew the devil of all Earth and conspired with Tiber's family to overthrow the Eldian Empire. Through their combined efforts, Marley was able to conquer Eldia's mainland territory and force Karl Fritz to relocate the capital of his empire to Paradise Island. What happened in reality was that the Marleyans, who used to be oppressed by the Eldian Empire, became the oppressors and founded the Marleyan Empire instead, at the height of which was the Tiber's family that controlled every aspect of the Marleyan Empire except for the military one. As for the Eldian people, they will begin experiencing unimaginable suffering for the next hundreds of years. The group of Eldians that have decided to join King Fritz and leave towards the island are going to be separated into two subgroups. The first subgroup, which consisted of millions of Eldians, have been turned into colossal titans and will suffer a fate worse than death, as for the next hundreds of years they will form the three walls which protect the city from attack on Titan. While King Fritz is going to brainwash the remaining Eldians, making them forget all of these years of history. King Fritz and the nobility are going to live in the inner wall, where they are going to benefit from plenty, while everyone else is going to have to live a struggling and very isolationist lifestyle. As the rest of the world is going to advance, both in terms of production as well as technology, the people on Paradise Island are going to be forced to everlasting stagnation. What is even worse is that King Fritz realizes that one day the rest of the world is going to try to destroy the people on Paradise Island. And King Fritz took a vow never to allow himself or any of his descendants to defend themselves against an attack. Which means that at this point, King Fritz wants the Eldians to be genocided. He wants them to be completely wiped off the face of the earth because he hates his bloodline so much. But because he is selfish and he is a human being, he does not want to die himself. His sense of self-preservation triumphs, and he wants to be left alone to die of old age on the island. And instead, his children are going to suffer for the sins that he has committed. He wants to push his guilt, he wants to push his burden onto the future generations. Meanwhile, the Eldians who remained on the mainland are going to experience a lot of hardship. They are going to be treated as second-class citizens within the Marleyan Empire. All of the Eldians would be rounded up into camps. They would be forced to wear armbands to show that they are part of the Eldian race. Marriages between Eldians and Marleyans would be strictly forbidden, and the life of an Eldian would be counted just as important as the life of an animal. In fact, there is even a small story within the anime where the sister of Aaron's father gets brutally killed by the dogs of one of the guardsmen. And none of this is being investigated, none of this is being looked into, because most people view Eldians as pure evil and they do not care about their well-being. The only reason that the Eldians are still kept alive, rather than the Marleyans coming up with the Eldian solution, is because of their strategic value. The Marleyans realize that while they can't have the powers of the Titans themselves, they can use the Eldians as human weapons against the enemies of Marley. In other words, what Marley is doing is literally the same as what the Eldian Empire was doing. And for hundreds of years, their culture would be that of victimizing themselves, while in reality being the oppressor, not just towards the Eldians, but towards the other people in the Attack on Titan universe. Now, it's interesting to point out the way they would convince Eldians to fight on their side. The way they did this is to manipulate and weaponize history. All Eldians were forced to learn the official Marleyan version of history, as well as to teach it to their children. Questioning the official narrative could carry out a death sentence, as it happened to the girl Emir from the anime. The Marleyan version of history eliminated every positive contribution that the Eldian Empire had, such as building roads, technological achievements, agricultural breakthroughs. All of these were eliminated, and in exchange, the evils that the Eldians committed were greatly exaggerated to the point they did not make logical sense. For example, Eren's father asks that if the Eldians were genociding the Marleyans for thousands of years, how come there are even any Marleyans left alive today? Now, there were several ways a Eldian could escape this oppression and at least get a better lifestyle. One of the ways would be to join the Marleyan military. And as Marley was often involved in many conflicts around the world, battles and dangers were in no short supply. This meant that many of the Eldians which would enroll would most likely never make it back. And in the anime, we also notice how not only the Eldians were supposed to fight on the front line and blindly charge in machine gun fire, but some of them were also forced to wear suicide vests, which shows that Marley had very little intention of allowing many of these Eldians to return home. However, the people who did join the military would now have a different armband which separated them from the rest of the Eldians. And I assume that this different colored armband provided them many more rights within the Marleyan Empire. Finally, there was the warrior program, which only a few Eldian children could participate in. These children would be subjected to very difficult trading conditions as well as heavy indoctrination to make it absolutely sure that they will have unquestionable loyalty towards Marley. Loyalty which should transcend even family bonds. And should these children manage to graduate their training, they would have the honor of inheriting one of the founding titans and then be sent on the front lines in order to crush the enemies of Marley. And as you can imagine, these children, even after inheriting their powers, would be under constant surveillance and monitoring by the Marleyans. Any show of disloyalty or disobedience would cause the Marleyan hammer to fall upon their friends and family. However, the reason that most people wanted to join the warrior program was that once they graduated, they would become honorary Marleyans. They would receive red armbands and be allowed to live outside of the Eldian encampment zones. This privilege would also be extended to their close family members. And this is why a lot of parents would encourage their children to partake in the warrior program, knowing that these children would suffer the Curse of Emir if proven successful, and they would die brutally 13 years after inheriting the Titans. I hope you like this video, and based on how many people view it and how many people share it around, if I notice that there is interest in me continuing this, I will make a part 2 where I will explain the rationale between the conflict that Marley has brought upon the island of Paradiso. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you guys there.